All right, so Scotty and Chad, I'm just gonna say hi to you guys again in the recording. See who want to see it back. So today we're going to use hand models to emulate sort of a realistic version of your hands in VR, so you can see the difference when you're opening and closing your hands. Now, I assigned as homework for you guys to find a hand model for yourselves. Either of you managed to do that?
I did not. I barely got to where I was able to do what I did.
Same.
You guys let me down.
Sorry, I apologize. I was happy to be able to grab the cube. I thought that was a win.
Okay, fair enough, fair enough. I will post a link to the Slack channel. In the general chat, I have posted two hand models, opened and closed. I would just use the FBX files at the bottom. And download those. We'll use those as our base. So there are mine. I went into my wherever it was. Can I find it? Sorry, just a second. Downloads. I put them in my PC. So yeah, simply put, wherever you download those two hands, you can just select them, and simply click and drag them from your Finder or your Windows Explorer, and just drag them into Unity. Bam, they appear as so. I don't want to go too fast here, but you guys both have the hands downloaded?
I do not. I'm trying to log into Slack right now. I have a password.
Okay. At this point, just waiting for you guys to have the hands ready. Once we do, we're going to bring those models in and replace our hands, our controllers with them. In my case, I just use this pink cube as my simulated hand. You will replace your simulated hand as well as your VR controllers with these hand models. We're going to use these basic ones that I have here, but you guys, once you venture off, you can definitely get different, like there's an example I gave was a knight's glove. You can use a surgical little glove or whatever you'd like. That being said, you can also replace your camera head with some 3D model as well. So, for example, if it was a medical application, you could have a surgical mask representing your camera and then surgical gloves. And so, if you decided to make it a multiplayer application, the other people would see you with that, or if you looked in the mirror, you would see your surgical mask, or if you decided to even place a helmet on yourself, making it visible to you even when you're wearing the camera rig, that's also another option. I'm just talking while I wait for you guys.
Okay. You just want us to download the FBX and drag it over to an asset?
Exactly, yeah. So download those two files, bring them into your Unity project folder. How's it looking, Scotty? Scotty?
Sorry. I'm good. I downloaded them.
Okay. Are they in your project folder over here?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, wait a minute. I put them in my assets VR. So I need to put them where? Yeah, that's where I have them.
That's it. Good. Good.
Yep.
All right, Chad. It's in as well.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So this is what we'll do. We're gonna select our hand. We'll go through it with the sim hand, and then you guys can also do it with the VR hand. That said, Chad, I'm gonna check something with you. I'm gonna mute you, and you try to unmute yourself. Let me know if that works.
Okay.
1 second. Okay. I think you're able to unmute yourself now. Give it a go. Still muted. So I can't unmute you, but if you notice at the bottom left of your screen, so if you hover your mouse over the center, you'll see this little.
There we go.
Awesome. Okay. I can hear a lot of background noise coming from your mic. Thank you. All right. So your simulated hand, what we're going to do is we're going to place both our closed hand and our open hand in the same spot. And what we'll be doing is toggling between the two. So when our grip button is let go and it's released, our hand trigger is released, we're going to have an open hand. When we squeeze our hand trigger or we squeeze the grip button, we're going to turn off the open hand, turn on the closed hand, and that's, again, go back and forth between those two. For our simulated hand, we're using the G for golf. We're using that key, so we're just going to assign with that as well. So either one of those will work. And let's get started. So this is hand. Let's say this is again. What I'm going to do with this is
So I copied over I just had the email. I couldn't get into Slack on my computer, so I downloaded the Slack from a phone and emailed the FBX file and a blend file.
you don't need the blend file.
Okay, well I did both, but anyway.
That's good.
So I got the FBX file and dropped it into my assets on Unity, and it just has like camera, lamp point, ZBrush. It doesn't have the word hand anymore.
That's fine. As soon as you bring in the whole prefab into the scene, it'll show you the 3D model. So anyways, what we'll be doing is, so your what we've been using as your hand, we're going to replace that with the 3D hand model. So if I bring in my hand to the scene, you'll notice it is ginormous. It's just the biggest hand. Like, sure Donald Trump would be very jealous. Sorry, I don't mean to make political statements. But yeah, so this hand is huge. If you've ever played Super Smash Bros, then you'll remember this as like the Magic Hand final boss. So one of the first things we'll need to do is scale it down, rotate it, position it properly. Let me bring it back into the scene like I did before. What I'm going to start by doing is I'm going to take this hand and make it a child of my cube, of the one that's my simulated hand. So let's take this hand, hands open, I'm going to click and drag it, make it a child of my simulated hand. Once you do it with the simulated hand, there'll be pretty much the exact same steps to do it with your Vive or Oculus controllers. So now that that's there, it doesn't need the animator component, so feel free to remove that, but not too important. The hand is there. I'm going to reset its transform to get a good start. Now, this is a bit of the tricky part, and this is what you have to feel out as you go through the development process. now that it's a child, I want it to face the appropriate direction. So I rotate it, or you know what, let's start with scaling it because it's a bit unmanageable at this point. I want to scale it down, make it look about the same size as my cube. When you're doing this with the controller, it will, ideally you want to try and make it the same size as the controller as well. When you're using the Oculus controllers, you have a really useful reference point matching the hands that you see on the controllers. With the Vive, try to make it as big as you can of the wands that you're holding. Try to make it as big as you can as the wand minus that circular part on the top of the controller, and that'll give you a good feel for how big the hands should be. With that said, when you're here, got the scale, rotate it so that it lines up with how you think your hand should be. So before I do that, I'm going to take the cube that I had representing my hand. I'm going to turn off the mesh runner. There it is, my hand is in space. This would be the forward direction, so I'm going to rotate it like this. It's about, in my case, -90 in X. And then I will rotate it. Whoa. Take the hand, rotate it like this, and rotate it like that. That gives me a good idea here. So -90 in my case, the Y, say 45 in the Z. So that's how, if I'm reaching out into a space, it gives me a good sense of it. Now, that's me positioning my hand through the scene view, which is nice and easy to do, but you want to be able to do this while you can see your controllers, because when it comes to the Vive or Oculus, you can't actually see your hands unless you're in play mode. So this becomes a bit trickier there. What you want to do then is, I'm going to turn this back on so you can see the mesh. So when I'm outside of play mode, we can imagine this is your controller in VR. When I'm outside of play mode, it's invisible. You can't see your controllers. When you hit play, when you hit play, and then suddenly you can see your controllers, you can see your hands. So in play mode, usually I advise against this, but this is when we're going to make the changes. In play mode, when you hit play, pause it right away, or pause it when you can see your hand or your controllers. So imagine this is my Vive hand, or my Vive wand, and I am going to take the hands open, and I'm going to make it a child of my Vive controller, or my Oculus controller. Now, still in play mode, we're going to match our hand to that of the controller. So my controller is this size of this pink cube. I'm going to try and match it to a comfortable size relative to the cube. I am going to temporarily turn off that cube so I can see through it. Now to do that, turn off the models. So if I'm looking at the Vive controllers, for example, click on the camera rig, and I see my controllers. If I put the drop down on the controller as well, I can see the model. And I can turn the model on and off. So I can aim here, there we go. So you can turn that on and off. Anyways, back to our hands. Once you're here, position the hands as you would so that it feels right. Once it's here, I'm going to rotate it, in this case like this, pretty much 90 degrees in the Y for me, and then rotate it down. Feel like that's the best way to go about it. I'm going to just quickly share my face here. So stop presenting. So a good way to go about this process is, let me show myself in the recording as well. So the idea would be, in VR, with one hand holding the controller, reach out like this. Your hands bent forward like this, holding your controller, whether it being the wand or being the Oculus controller, hold it out however you feel like your hand makes sense going straight. Once it's there like this, hit the pause button in Unity, and then you know that your hand, so I'm going to stop, I'm going to share my screen again. then you know your hand should be this direction, and then you take your hand open model and try to line it up. That's the key. You're just trying to line it up so it fits, feels right. And once it's like this is the important part. So once you've settled up your hand, it looks like it's matching what your controller should be. You're going to then select your hand, go to its transform properties. This is important. Once you've found a comfortable position for your hand, have it selected, go over to the transform property, right click, and copy that component. We're doing so that we can paste over it. So hand selected, right click transform, copy component. Now we can leave play mode. Now when we're here, we're going to click and drag. So now that we're out of play mode, right now we're doing this with our simulated hand, but that concept is going to be the same. We're going to take our hand, we're going to make it a child of our simulated hand once again. Now it's big, as you see again, but this time we have those values from our copied component. Going to go over to your transform property, right click, paste component values, and bam, it is positioned just like we did when we were in play mode. Okay, so I'm going to give you guys a minute to catch up to the point. I'm going to repeat here in a second, and I'll assist you in a bit. 1 second, I'll be right there. Alright, sorry about the delay. I am back. I have an exam tomorrow, so my colleagues were wishing me good luck. Now, the upside for doing it this way is we can easily, once we're done this, we can do the exact, like, we have those component values that we wanted. The way I've set up these hands is they're the exact same size, and that's usually going to be the case if you have a hand model that's animated or if you're using the same hand twice. When you once you're done this part, you can click and drag the hand closed as a child of AN as well, and you'll see that it's, oh, sorry, I missed that time. Let me do that again. You can click and drag the hand closed into the model. See, it's really large and not aligned. You're gonna go back into transform, right click, and paste component values again. Boom, it's lined up just the same. And the idea would be to then go with our hands opened and toggling between the hands open and hands closed would emulate sort of a grabbing of the object, opening and closing your hand. But up until that point, you will have two hands, one within the other. Okay, so I'm just going to repeat the process of getting the open hand properly positioned. And this time I'll get you guys to follow along. So when we're in play mode, we're going to do this in play mode, just so that this process is the same when you're using it with the controllers. You can do so with your controllers right now if you'd like, and that would make life possibly a bit easier. So we have our Revive hooked up, we have our Oculus hooked up, or we're just going to do this with our simulated hand. By default, the mesh should be appearing, so let's say this is it. I'm going to hit play, so I can see my hands in VR. Again, this is because your hands in Vive and Oculus don't appear unless you're in play mode. Once you're in play mode and you can see your hand, pause it. If your hand is somewhere else in the screen, double click on it, make sure your hand's over there somewhere, double click on it so you can focus in on it. Or if your mouse is hovering over the scene view but you have the object selected, say F and you'll get you right to it. Now that you're here, you're going to take one of these hands. Let's say, for example, the open hand. Click and drag it onto your controller or your simulated hand. And now it is a child. It's this giant hand, poorly positioned, poorly rotated by default, so we're going to realign it. Again, this is a child of the controller. It's a child of the simulated hand. It's not going to have some sort of mesh to it in terms of collision. We're just going to use it as a visual representation of our controllers. Now that this is here, we've paused the game. We're going to then rotate this hand to be more aligned with our controller or our simulated hand. So in my case, I'm just going to rotate it 90 degrees along this Y plane. So now it's at least facing forward. And I'm going to rotate it, let's say, 45 degrees forward. So now it looks about right. Now you can do the rotation first or the scale first. I'd recommend scale, right? And so you can hit the R key or go up to the top left where the scale tool is there and scale it way down. Now the hand is the appropriate size here. I'm just going to, you can imagine this other hand is your controller. You can just turn the mesh off so you're not seeing it for now. But there, my hand is positioned well. But I am in play mode, so if I hit the play button, this will revert and I would have lost this information. So what I'm going to do is, before I leave play mode, I am going to make sure that my hand is selected, my hand open, the 3D model. I'm going to go over to its transform property, right click, and copy the component. So, hand open, selected. Top right in the transform property, right click, copy component. I'm going to give you guys a minute just to catch up to this point because positioning your hand is probably going to take the longest. Yeah, position it. Remember, if you're using Oculus, you can. The best method would be to just line up your hand with the hands that you see in the Oculus controller because those actually show you hands already. Does anyone need more time lining their hands up?
Yeah, I do. I'm still lining it.
Okay.
For one thing, so I'm using the Rift and I resize my hand, that's fine. And I'm just trying to line it directly on top of the controller, the left controller. But I can't really see the left controller. I never really could see it in not in play mode, but just looking around, it's kind of like invisible. I don't know if I was supposed to give it some kind of texture or color or no, because I don't really see it. Let's see.
Okay, can I get you to share screen? Remember, the controllers do not appear outside of play mode. They're rendered during the app.
Oh, okay. So
if you hit play, then wait a second. If it doesn't load right away, you should be able to then see your hands in VR. When you do, pause the map, pause the game, and then line your hands up to it.
it's still really hard to tell. So the controller is just a square, right?
And controller.
Mine. Here, can I show you?
Yeah, for sure. Let's take a look.
I've got, so can you see how So a mess this is. I've got it.
So you're
Is
not,
this
you're not
my
sharing your
controller?
screen yet.
Oh, you're not? All right. Well,
You're not sharing your screen. Oh, there we go. Okay.
all right. So here, is this the controller, the square?
The square. So
Yes.
you have your controller selected, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's just get a fresh start so I can see. So hit play. Let's get out of play mode and do this again. So go ahead and hit play now. Oh, you already have your open hand there. Huh.
Yeah.
Okay.
I've got the hand on there. It's just not lining up with the controller because it's hard for me to see.
So delete that hand for now. We'll get back to it in a second. Okay. And controller left. Hit play. You can wave your hand controllers around until you can see one. Let's see if you can zoom in on one. There, I see something moving around. A pink thing. Is that your hand there? Okay. So what I'd recommend doing is, well, I guess in your case it's fine. So just put your hand up so it's above the floor. And yeah, perfect. So now hit play. No, or sorry, now hit pause in Unity. Alright, so now you have your hand selected. It's giving you a visual representation of your hand. Can you maximize Unity so we can see it better? You don't need to see my screen right now. Click and drag the inspector tab from the side there in between scene and inspector so that it makes your scene view a bit bigger. You know what I mean? So
what are you going to do?
So this line that's dividing the scene and inspector tabs, yeah, just click and drag that all the way to the right. Nice, okay. So double click on controller left so you can focus in on it. Awesome, look at that. Okay, so you can see the hand, so we can use that to get a good representation of what your hand should look like. So take that 3D model. Yeah, so take that 3D model that we have and click and drag it onto controller left. Boom, massive. Okay, so let's scale it down.
It's still not small enough, right?
What I would do is hover over the scene view and push the R key just so we can get into the scale too. So select the hand in the hierarchy actually, because I think you're still in the input field. Yeah, now push the R key. Press R. Oh yeah, perfect actually. Sorry, I missed it. You see the white square there between the blue? So click and drag that either down or to the left. Yeah, there you go. You get a better sense of scale here. You know what I would recommend? I think you're using the blend file. So the little drop down arrow to the left of 1772. So delete the camera, lamp, points, all those things. Delete those first 5 things.
Oh, just leave the ZBrush?
Exactly. Did it. Makes it a bit easier to see. All right, so click on that there, and so you just want the you want to make that on its own. So click and drag that so it's no longer a child of 177273, etc. Just click and drag that out.
Make it a child of the controller?
Yes, exactly, and not the other thing. Okay, perfect. So now you use the transform property. You see there the X, Y, Z levels there. Actually, just right click on the word transform and reset. Because let's get a bit closer. Alright, so let's get a better view angle here. Actually, that's fine. There we go. So hit the E key. I'm going to rotate this guy around a little bit. Right. Now rotate. Awesome. And using
It's backwards. I need to-
Yeah, you're
Looks
getting
like
it.
it's the wrong hand though.
That's fine. That's an easy fix. Don't worry about that.
Okay.
So yeah, just try to line it up a bit better. Okay, do you see where it says Z scale? So ZBrush model from the hierarchy tab. There you go. So you see where it says Z, the scale 111 XYZ? Where it says Z, change that to a -1 instead. -1. Boom. Now you're good. Now it's the proper. That's how you, by the way, that's how you switch between right and left. You just take the Z, make it negative.
Oh, okay.
So click and drag that. Yeah, now you can sort of manipulate it. Yeah, get a good feel for where it should be. Pushing E again. Yeah, rotate it around, I guess. So to make this a bit easier, you notice at the top left where it says local. You see where it's the scene tab is? Right, just up and to the left of it, it says local.
Oh yeah.
Click on that. Now you got global axes to work with. So this is going to make this quite a bit easier for you to work. So now when you rotate, it's going to be consistently along certain axes. See that? There you go. Nice and easy.
Okay. Does it have to be like cover the whole thing? I mean, what do we want to do here?
We'll get rid of the other controller meshes later, but for now, just try to line it up. I think this one probably can get away with being a bit bigger, but I would press the R key and just scale it up. So when you have it selected, ZBrush model, not that one there, but yeah, and just click and drag that middle part there, that middle cube. It's just so that we keep the ratio between them all the same. It's looking not bad. It's not bad.
Should I make it or whatever like that? Is that okay?
That's up to you. It looks better, but
Oh.
that's
okay.
That's solid. All right, so that's gonna be a rather big hand, but it will be fine. So now here's the important thing. Right-click on transform. Snap, that got rid. Right-click on the word transform. Copy that component. Perfect. Now you can get out of play mode. Alright, so now that will get rid of the brush altogether. That's fine. So now select your controller left from the hierarchy tab. Click and drag the ZBrush Polymesh 3D object from your assets folder. You see that? Or, yeah, Polymesh 3D. That thing, yeah. Just click and drag that onto the controller. There it is. And now you can just right click on the transform property and paste component values.
Yeah, it's huge.
I think you need to use the ZBrush model mesh. So I think you managed to somehow change it to 1722. So no, you're fine. Just look back in the hierarchy tab. We're just going to take out that model that we wanted. So that ZBrush Polymesh 3D at the bottom. That's what you want. No, don't copy. Don't copy. Do not.
No, you want me to delete?
No. Just click and drag it and make it a child of controller left. Oh, phew. Okay. Yes, and paste the values into this object. So in the transform button, yep, exactly. Paste it there. Boom. Now it's good. You can delete the 17727 item there.
This?
Yes. You're good to go with that. Whew. Okay. Cool.
All right,
stuff.
thanks.
All right.
I'll never. All right.
So you're now that you have that, you're doing the same thing with your what is that one? That's your closed hand, right?
That was open hand.
So then you want the other model, bring it in as a child, and this time all you have to do is just paste the component values because you have them saved from before when you lined it up the first time.
So when I put in the FBX file, it just gave me this. This is all I had. So I don't really know how I tell the difference between open and closed hand. It never mentions that until I bring it over.
I see. Can you open up your file folder where you downloaded them?
Well, it just came over as one big this FBX file. I dragged this whole file over there.
I see. Can you go back to Slack real quick, and instead I think you should use the Blender files. That might be easier for you.
I've got the Blender file here.
You only
try
got
that
one of them? So make sure to grab the other one as well. So yeah, go back to Slack and download the other one. Posted hand closed and hand open. But if it's easier, use the blend files.
Is there one? You can help Scotty while I do this because I'm about to go back to my phone and email.
Okay. I see. Scotty, how's it looking for you? You got them positioned well and rotated?
I can let you take a look. I think I have it, but I'm not real confident. But
okay. Yeah, let's see.
Okay. I'm still in play mode, but I paused it. I'm not sure if I did something prematurely or not. I have my hand closed as a child of the hand. I kind of, caught up with what you were doing with Chad, so I managed to scale it properly, I think. But then I made the open hand a child of closed and just pasted the transform values, but I forgot to do that out of play mode, so I'm not sure what to do now.
Okay, but you still have those values copied, so you're good.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so now you can go out of play mode, and then it's a simple drag and drop your hand model onto. Oh, so you still have your hand closed there. Okay, no, that's good. So click on your hand closed object and paste those component values on the transform. Right click on transform and paste component values. So where did it go? Okay, so it was meant for the ZBrush model. That's good then.
Wait a minute.
Yeah, so bring that out, make that a child of your hand. Yes. Continue. And then paste it there. So transform, right click, paste the component values.
Okay.
That's right. All right. I would zero out the position in the transform. Just go in there and just 0, 0, 0 on the XY side.
Oh, in position or scale?
Position.
Okay.
Awesome. So that looks good. I'm not sure from which direction the camera's looking, but that should be all right. I think you might need to rotate it a little bit on the Y. So push the E key and click and drag that green circle a little bit to your left. So it lines up with the red. So more perfect. That's good. That looks good. Okay, and then what I would recommend is renaming this instead of ZBrush Polymesh 3D. Rename it to Hand Closed. Awesome. And you can delete the other thing, the one that says Hand Closed.
Delete that one?
Yeah, that has a bunch of unnecessary stuff.
Okay.
Cool. So that looks solid. You see the actual hand that we have, the cylinder? Select that. The main object, the hand object, the one that's named hand. You see the mesh renderer component? Uncheck that. So now it's just your hand being represented.
Okay.
Alright, so now what you can do is take the ZBrush model from your open hand and put it under your hand. So click on that little drop-down arrow to the next to it. So don't import it directly, because I think the models you guys have a bunch of mini stuff inside. So click on that arrow
Okay.
on the right side of it. And the ZBrush model, that's what you want. So click and drag that onto hand.
Wait, let me see it.
Didn't come up? Try again.
Nope.
Try the one on the far right side of the projects tab. You see that one at the top right of it? That's the one. There we go. There we go.
Okay.
So now, quick workaround for that is click on hand closed. Right click on transform and copy that component. No, not paste. So Control Z.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No worries. Alright, so yeah, you want to copy the component. And our hands open. Yeah, that one. Can you click on the drop down to the left of it? Let's see all of its sub properties and stuff. And take the ZBrush model mesh 3D out of there. Click and drag that out of there. And make it a child of the hand. Perfect, yeah. Continue. And just nice and simple, right click on the word transform, paste the component values, and it should be solid. Look at that. Nice.
Okay, cool.
Rename it to hand open. That'll make it easier to keep track. And that hands open game object, you can just get rid of that.
This?
Yep, just delete that. Right on, awesome. So I think for when you're setting up your Vive, just use those to sort of, instead of re-importing the ones that are in your projects tab, because those might be a bit of a pain to deal with now, but you got past that. Right on.
So all I need to do now is drop those into my controller left and controller right.
Yeah, but as I was saying with the way we were setting them up is to be in play mode with your Vives. When you're in play mode and you can see your Vive controller in the scene view in Unity, pause the game and then align your hands.
Gotcha. Okay.
But for now, that's good. Next step, what we're going to do is toggle them on and off, and that way you'll be able to do the same with your Vive when you're running that stuff. But that looks good.
Thank you, sir.
No worries. Chad, how's it looking?
So yeah, I'll share what I have. Basically, I just was going to Slack, and I keep on getting these blend files, but they're just this. When I import them, they're not. There's nothing. I don't see anything in there. And when I do the two FBX files, the open hand and the closed hand, I just get these things. So the blend files don't seem to be, and I just drag them over after importing them. I just email them to myself, unless it's stripping something out. I don't know.
So we got to figure out which one's the open and which one's the closed, because you should have at least two, right? The ones that.
Yeah. So I've got two FBXs, and one's open and one's closed. This should be the closed one here.
All right. Let's see which one is the one that's under your controller left right now. Can you double click on that one? Yeah, double click. Let's focus on it. And that is your closed one. So that's your closed, right?
Doesn't look closed, but yep.
Yeah, it's like a claw. All right, I'm not the best artist, so this is the best.
Okay. A clawed hand. Okay.
Yeah. With that said, can you copy the transform component so that we have those values to use? And what we'll do is, if you use the open hand one, the one that's fully open, and click and drag that into the scene.
Just put it under the controller as a child as well.
That's right. Zoom on out. Let's take a look at that. So yeah, that one's closed. So that's the closed one.
So that was the one so I have two closed basically.
I think so. Yeah.
All right, let me undo that. All right, let me try. Must be the other one then.
Nope, same
Oh,
one.
yeah.
You got the same one twice. Alright,
Oh yeah, same file. Huh.
so it's, if you take a look in the Slack, it's named hands open, hands closed.
Yeah, hand closed, and then
Hands open FBX.
oops. And so I want hand open FBX.
That's right.
God, Windows. I'm not getting this one. Gotta be this one.
I think that's right.
Okay, so try one more time.
Yeah.
Hopefully that.
Yeah, I think that's the one you want. So let's see if you can just click and drag that in. So I guess that's just the mesh. So you're gonna have to click and drag the ZBrush Polymesh 3D prefab, that blue cube. Just up two. Up. There you go. Awesome. So yeah, it seems to be coming with all those components as well. Is that the closed hand again? That's the closed hand.
Yeah. That has to be it. All right.
No, it's the very top one. You have 1, 3. So very top.
Well,
That's up one more. There it is.
all right.
Yeah, sweet. Okay, so now you have it.
Yay. All right.
All right. See, now that's open, right? That's the open
Yeah,
hand.
that's definitely open.
So we've already made those values, right? So all you need to do is click on the drop down for that model, that prefab that you just imported. Yeah. Click and drag the ZBrush Polymesh 3D, that little sub object there. Click and drag that out. Make it a child of the controller left. Yes, continue. And we're going to right click on its transform property and paste component values. Boom. So that should be about the same size as your other hand. See, there you go. Now you got two hands inside of a third one. Okay, so I think that's great. It looks set up pretty well. Those are some things you can tweak on your own until you're more comfortable with the size. So now delete that one. You don't need that middle thing there.
This one, right?
Yeah, you don't need it. So the next thing I would recommend is selecting that second one there and renaming it open hand or hands open or something like that. Perfect. And then closed hand for the other. All right, I'm gonna ask you to do me a solid here. Can you zoom in on the closed hand? Just hit double click on it or hit F. Okay. Can you hold the Alt key and let's just take a look at it from a different side here. Click and drag. Alright, so that is...
Hands are shaking. All right. Friendly hands. All right, with a different sizes.
Alright, so can you select that pink thing? Can you click on the pink window? What is that? That's your local avatar? Interesting. Controller left, alright, and click on the big hand there. Closed hand, and click on the open hand. Oh, okay, that's fine. They're both the same size. I don't know what that pink one is from, though. That's interesting. I think it's just
That's the controller, I mean, isn't it?
I don't know, it's a pink hand like that. Click on hand left. Yeah, interesting. The pink hand is, that's odd. Not sure what that's from. But, alright, won't worry about it for now. We'll deal with that later. But,
Can I just turn it off? Or do I need it?
I think that's for something else. That's not actually that pink model. Can you click on, like, the wrist of that pink hand? One more time. Okay, so that is your controller left. Can you... freak, that's gonna be weird. Okay. Scroll down in the inspector a little bit. A bit more. And can you uncheck the mesh renderer? Okay, so that looks good. So now we have an open and closed hand. So that's solid. You're good there. Alright, so now what we're going to do is... I think you're caught up. I think that looks good. Alright. No, okay, you're good. You need to make one for the right hand as well, so what I would recommend is select both your closed hand and open hand. Right click and copy. And then select your controller right. Right click and paste. Make it a child. Make them both child. Now, you notice the Z value is negative, so make that positive and you'll have it for the opposite hand. Just the scale, sorry. So I wouldn't erase all of it, just take the very beginning, just do a backspace at the very beginning and just make it positive instead of negative. Just need to get rid of that. Perfect, so now you have one for your right hand as well. Alright, so Chad, you're ready to move on to the next step. I think Scotty is as well. So we're going to create a little functionality in our script. Alright, so you guys, if you don't mind, Chad, I'm going to ask you to mute yourself. So as I was saying, we have our hands set up nicely here. In my case, I have my hands open. Copy the values there, so it's gone. Take my hand AM script again. Take my hands open, make it a child. Right click on the word transform, reset paste component values. So it's set up like that. Take my closed hand. Also just paste component values, and they're set up together. I can then turn off the mesh render for my cube, or in the case of the Vive controllers, they have these little models underneath the controller game object. So you have the camera rig, controller left, controller right. Click on the drop down, and then there's this model game object that comes underneath. You can just delete those or turn them off. Now, it doesn't look quite as good when you have both the open and closed hand on at the same time. So by default, we're going to start with the closed hand turned off. This is going to be for both of your controllers. Closed hand will be turned off. Next, we're going to go into our hand script, the one we've been using to grab objects. And as I was saying before, we're going to toggle between our one hand being open and the other hand being closed. And let's go hand again. Seems odd. 1 second. Seems like hand AN script was prematurely edited. There we go. So, in your hand script, you should have, the 3 statements you can use for different headsets and inputs. And towards the top, you have those 2 variables we used. Okay, so your hand script, you have at the very beginning, unless you're using the Vive, you have this extra block of code. You have 2 variables. One is colliding object, which is checking to see if you're touching an object, and 2, object in hand, which is going to let the computer know that you are in fact now holding an object. Yeah.
Usman, is this a new code that new script that we need to create, or?
No. This is our hand script that we've already made. This is what we have on the controller. This is what we have on our simulated hand already. But I would recommend opening it up at this point. The hand script. Do you see it?
Yes. Yes.
Awesome. So yeah, let's open that up. Get to this point where you can see those 2 variables at the top. Alright, with that said, we're going to create 2 more variables, and those are going to be referencing our open and closed hand models, the ones that we're using for the visuals. So let's create a public game object, and this is going to be our open hand. So let me just do open. Okay, screw it. So hand open. And one more that will reference our hand closed. So we just added 2 variables. And again, I'm making these public so I can see them in the inspector. I'll bring that go right up again. 1 second. So we go to my hand object. I turned off the mesh render for my actual cube, so I can't see the cube anymore, but it has 2 children objects. So these 2 objects, the hand open and the hand closed, are going to be around following wherever my hand goes. If I was to hit play right now, you'll see them follow along. See? And I can now go in here and hold the G key. One sec, hand in. Does not have the hand in script on it. So let me put that on. There we go. Sorry about that. So here's my script. Boom, touching the object with my hand, and now I can move it around. So the goal now is to toggle between the open and closed hand. So make play. Colliding object, object in hand are variables that update when you touch an object and when you have one in your hand, which is going to come and play here in a second. But making sure you have these 2 lines at the top, hand open, hand closed. We're going to take...
Does it matter if I name mine open hand and a closed hand, or does that not matter?
Does not matter.
Okay.
As long as you're consistent with the calling of those variables later. So those variables there, this is the more complex part of it comes in. We have been checking two conditions at the same time in one if statement. Notice that if input.getKeyDown G and colliding object. This is also the same with the OVR and OVR input, where we're checking to see if you've squeezed your primary or your hand trigger, primary or secondary. This is you pulling your middle finger in with your controller and checking to see, again, if you're actually touching an object, colliding object. With the Vive controllers, it's if you're squeezing the grip buttons and you're touching an object. So all three of these are only going to call the grab function if you are pushing the button, squeezing the grip, and colliding. However, when it comes to our hand, our visual hand, we want it to open and close regardless of whether or not we're touching an object. We just don't want it to actually call the grab function if we're not. So that's the distinction there. So what we end up doing is we create a little bit of a space between the two. So we create what's called a nested if statement, which is simply an if statement within another if statement. So you put one inside the other. So if I go if colliding object and then I put the grab function in there, after which I can remove the colliding object condition from that if statement. I'll do that with all of these. Don't need them anymore. Now currently, the way it is structured, which would look a bit more like this if it was just the one if statement. What we're doing is we're going to check first, are we pushing the G key down? Now if you have this commented out and you're using one of the controllers, if you're squeezing the hand trigger, if you're squeezing the grip button on your Vive controller, so you're only going to use one of those, but regardless of which one, that is the if statement you check. And then once you're inside the scope of that if statement, so that means that's true, what's the next thing we're going to do? We're going to check to see if you're also touching an object. We don't want to call the grab function unless we are touching an object, because what happens is, if we're not touching an object, if colliding object is null, in our grab function, the first thing we do is we go object in hand equals colliding object. Okay, that means it's null. Then we set the parent of something that's null to something else. Then we try to access its rigid body. Both of those will cause some serious errors. So making sure we're checking for an object being touched before we call the grab function. Anyways, beyond that, we have this little condition here separated, so before we even call the grab function, we're going to squeeze our hand. We're going to show that the 3D models are, closing and opening. And what we use is called set active. So we want to, if we're going to grab, we want to say our hand is now closed. So we go closed hand or hand closed, based on whichever one you went with. Hand closed dot set active, and we will say, in this case it is true. So if you squeeze your grip, we're going to turn on our hand closed. We're going to set it to active. But we're also going to say hand open, or open hand, is set false. It's not active anymore. This is our way of toggling between the two. We're doing the same thing with the release, but so I'll let you copy this down after. I'm just going to go over essentially the same idea with our release function. Then we'll go back and let you write it down. So in our release function, what we're doing is we're checking to see if we released the G key, if we released the hand trigger on our Oculus controller, or we released the grip button on our Vive controller. We're in all of those if statements, we're also checking to see if we in fact have an object in our hand there's no reason to call the release function if there's nothing to release. So that's why we're checking to see if we have an object in our hand. Now we can do the same thing if we just put the if condition inside of this if condition. This is, again, called a nested if statement. So now that I've put this inside, that means I can separate between checking to see if you've released the grip and if you're holding an object. So we get that little bit of a separation between the two. When it comes to this point, when it comes to actually calling the release function, there is no difference in its mind by using this if statement versus this if statement inside of this if statement. This is, in terms of the release function, to it, there's no difference. But now that we have this distinction, we can get rid of the second check here in the second condition in our if statements. Don't need those. Instead, we're doing this so that we can have a little bit of a run between the two checks. So we can go, if input.getKey up G, so we release the G key, or release the hand trigger, or release the grip button. That means we can then take our hand closed, set it active. You can set it to false. This is how you turn it off. Now you can't see your hand closed anymore. But we want to be able to see something, so we want to be able to set our hand open to true. This is how we are now toggling between the two. So regardless of if you're touching an object, if you squeeze the grips, you push the G key, your hand will close. And regardless of if you're holding an object or not, if you release the G key or release the grips or hand triggers, your hand will open. We'll toggle between the two hand statements. So I'm going to save this and show you, and I'll bring this script right back up there in a second. What you're going to want to do after you have copied that down, you'll notice that in your hand script, two new variables will appear: hand open, hand closed. What do you think those are going to reference? They're going to reference the variables. They're going to reference the two game objects you have represented in each hand. So hand open goes into hand open. Hand closed goes into hand closed. Now when I hit play, initially I'm going to have both open, so that's something I have to fix right away, but I can go between the two now. But see, that gives me a nice visual representation of what's going on. One last thing is when you start testing, you want to take the hand closed and turn it off by default at the beginning, so that when you start out, it's not already open. So then now you can see that, boom, open, close, open, close. I don't know, this always amuses me, but there you go. I'm going to put the script back up here in a second. Once you guys are ready, I'll just repeat that little setup process in Unity once again. And remember, Chad, for you it is closed hand and open hand, not hand closed and hand open. In case you forgot.
So that's the question I have. If I stuck with your naming convention, it doesn't matter what I name the assets, or does it?
Oh, the names of the assets don't mean anything. Don't worry about it.
So if I copy yours directly, it shouldn't matter, right? As long as I keep the same in the script, right?
That's right.
Okay.
I'm going to zoom in for you guys here. Sorry if that took you off, but here you go. It's the update loop. I'm gonna copy this, put it in a code share for us if you guys have any difficulty catching it. Just remember that if you're going to copy directly from the code share, the public class hand_an, make sure that hand_an is named exactly the same as your file name for the script. That public class at the very top, that has to match the name of the file. But till that point, does anyone need more time with writing the script down? Because then we can get on to setting it up for you guys.
I think I'm okay.
How you doing, Chad?
Yeah, I'm still copying. I mean, you can do what you gotta do, but I'm still copying it.
Okay. No, wait a sec. Chad, in the chat, I posted a link to the code share. Use that as a reference if you need to copy down anything. I do prefer you guys write it down, type it out, instead of straight copy paste, but there's the option. So now that we have our script ready, I'm going to go back to our hand_an thing here. So this is what it should look like. Your hand that you've simulated or your controller that you have, you're going to go and look at the hand open, hand closed variable slots. They should say none by default. So what you're going to do is then take those two hands that you have, these 3D models, click and drag the hands open 3D model into the hands open slot, click and drag the hand closed model into the hand closed slot. Once you're done with that, take your hand closed 3D model in your scene and just turn that off so that you start with one hand rather than both of them at the same time. When you hit play, you'll see that you can toggle between the two. Where did my hand go? There you
Okay. Did you send a link to the code share via Slack?
No, it's in our chat.
Okay.
So, like I was saying towards the beginning of the class, that's how you set up some custom hands. If you're using the Windows Mixed Reality system, you can replace the hands that you see in your controllers. If you look at where your controllers are appearing in the hierarchy tab, select them and you'll see that there is 2 slots for hand prefabs. Just replace those with your custom hands. At some point I'm sure we'll post a blog on how to go about that, but for now, you can address it in your one-on-ones if you need to. But yeah, so you can replace your hand with whatever hand you like. Get a knight in there, I don't know, boxer, whatever you'd like. Give it a good Make a fist, give it a good punch here and there. Whack. Whack. Again, I know it's not quite a fist, but hey, it's free, you know, no effort. That's what you get for not doing your homework, finding your own hands. All right, is that working for you guys? Scotty, is that looking good? Able to open and close?
Yes, sir. Yep.
Awesome. I'll see you at 6:15, or sorry, in 15 minutes.
Yes,
That's
sir.
it.
Okay.
All right. And Chad, how's it looking? Chad?
Yeah, I'm just finishing the script. I'll just watch the recording, end of the recording, and do the last part you did. See how it goes.
Okay, that sounds good. All right. If you guys want to still pursue that homework, I would recommend getting, more custom hands, even hands that have an animation. And if you needed to get that far, you can definitely discuss that in our one-on-ones. But you guys have a good night, or have a good night, Chad. I'll see you in a bit, Scotty. Take care.
Thanks.
Stop the recording.